All right, how's it going, Madison Park? You feeling good this morning? You got some energy this morning? Good, you better have it this morning. I'm just gonna jump in. Now, a little over 2 years ago, December, was the first time I visited Madison Park. I was talking with the board, was this going to be where we ultimately moved our family? And also, on that particular weekend, I preached. Now, when you don't know the people well and you're not sure of the context, you really weigh carefully what you're going to say in those kinds of messages. And I was sort of waffling back and forth between two primary illustrations. One of them was very safe, one of them was a little risky. So I chose the risky one, because I thought we should just get to know each other quickly. Why wait? So I shared this story over 2 years ago. I'm going to share it again today for a couple of reasons. One, there are a lot of people here that are new than were here then, and I feel like it's important you understand who's talking to you. Secondly, I got nothing better than this story for where we're going today. So back during my college years, you know where you make all of your best decisions? You understand. 18 to 22, where you're wisdom just oozes from you. Around the age of 21, I was engaged to another guy that is not currently my husband, but I was engaged prior. And this young gentleman lived in the state of North Carolina. I was going to school in South Carolina, he lived in North Carolina, and one particular weekend, we decided to drive up to see his family, and so we were driving through the hills of North Carolina, which are incredibly beautiful if you've ever been there. We were on a back road through the hills of North Carolina, and off to my right, I remember it very distinctly, as we were driving, there's a little dirt parking lot and a little, if I'm being generous, building called the Tattoo Shack. Now, what the story I'm telling you is simply going to be a sequence of poor decisions. A sequence of things that seemed like a really small thing at the time, but it is the culmination of the small things that went poorly. I don't know at what point I thought turning in and parking at a place called the Tattoo Shack would end up good, but nonetheless, I was 21 and immortal, and so we pulled in. Now, I'm with my, at the time, fiance. Neither one of us had discussed this prior. We had not given this any thought. We had not, for weeks, months, perhaps years, thought, what would I like to permanently have etched on my body? So we went into the Tattoo Shack, where, I kid you not, a guy named Bubba in overalls with a gun in the front pocket said, "Hey." Now again, one might think, surely that small choice to continue in the direction you were moving, Heather, there would have been a little bit of a red flag. Was there? No. No, there was not. So we say to Bubba, we'd like to get a tattoo. Of course, the natural question from him is, great, what would you like? We literally said, we don't know. He pointed us to a table that had large 3-ring binders full of thoughts and ideas. So we sit ourselves down at the table and we start perusing the three ring binders. And I come upon what it said at the top was Chinese alphabet. That's what it said. I know. Some of you who, if you are well-versed in Asian languages at all, you already know where this is wrong. Chinese alphabet, and then it listed the English alphabet and the corresponding Chinese character. Here's my brilliant idea. I'm engaged, I'm going to get married, my last name is going to change. I should get my maiden name initials tattooed on my ankle in Chinese. A fair question might be, do you have Asian history? I do not. Is there anything in your ancestry that might point to a high value or a relationship, of Asian descent? Nope. Did I even have an Asian friend? I did not. But nonetheless, I had two characters etched upon my ankle, in case you're wondering. I'm happy to show you today. People think, because as I move on through this story, you're going to think I'm lying. And I assure you, I am not lying. And of course, I want them, in multiple colors, so it's in a couple different colors, and I get done. And let's fast forward. Oh, by the way, now my fiance also gets some Chinese characters etched onto his body that, he thinks are his name. So, right, I know. No, I'm just going to give you a couple moments because you're going to laugh throughout this. And so I'm just going to, feel free to do so as you feel necessary. So fast forward years later, like a decade. I'm no longer with that person. Obviously, Jeff and I are married. I have small children. And I'm also an English teacher of high school students, one of which this particular year was a Chinese foreign exchange student. Very sweet, quiet, never really made much of a sound, really bright girl. And this was before iPhones, right? So this was before, you can Google something or I could take a picture and look it up on the internet. This is before those days. But this particular girl had what was called a pocket translator. It looked almost like a little mini typewriter device, like an old, label maker or such. And I'd always wondered, because, I've gained at that point several years of wisdom. I'm pretty confident Bubba wasn't telling us the entire truth. And so I'd always, wondered, surely, I need to find out what this actually means. And so I asked her one day after school because I'd noticed that she periodically glanced at my ankle with a very concerned look upon her face. So I said, hey, can we put this in your pocket translator? She at first says, which I understand. She's my student. I hold her grade. She's traveled across the world, right? This is important to her GPA. And she is saying no. But I, try and become, a very winsome teacher. I'm like, oh, no, it's fine. Whatever it means, it's okay. I know. It's going to mean something weird. I don't know what I thought it would mean. But nonetheless, we go through the process. She puts in the first character, and it gives her back the meaning. And she says to me, top one means smelly, bad smelly. And I thought, well, maybe the second one will redeem it. So she puts in the second one gets pulled up, and she says to me, it means air or smell. She says, Mrs. Simple, you could say your tattoo means fart. Right? This is where I say, take a minute. Let it out, because in the middle of the sermon is not when it'll come back to you and you'll want to laugh in the middle of the sermon, but we'll be discussing other things where it will feel inappropriate. But this is true. So I actually did bring a picture for you so you can see. It's real. It's real. And I remember when my oldest was 2 years old and I was sitting on the couch with my legs propped up and she came over and started to trace it with her finger. Mommy, what mean? And I said, oh, sweetheart, it means Jesus loves you. That's what it means. That's what it means, baby. Mama loves you. So I learned, and with my children, I've now made this deal with them, and I have fallen through with a couple of them so far. Judah's still too young, but I've said, look, when you want to get a tattoo, because they've been talking about tattoos, my fault. They've seen them on me since birth. They feel like it's normal. They've been talking about it. I said, that's fine. I'll take you. I'll pay for it. But I choose the place, and you have to decide a year prior and sit on it for a full year. And if after a year you feel like this is something you want on your body, we can discuss it. But I'm going with you, and I'm paying for it, because we ain't going to no place named Tattoo Shack with a guy named Bubba. I can tell you that much. And so I have followed through on that. And yeah, I feel like that's a parenting win. When my 18th birthday gift to my oldest was a tattoo, right? I remember when my parents saw mine and cried. We've come a long way. Come a long way. Small things can have a big impact, can we agree? Things that you think are just going to be meaningless, or they're not going to matter, or it's going to pass with time and nobody will care, or nobody will even remember that I didn't or that I did. They are often the things that have the greatest impact in our life. And in this series, we're talking about grit. What it's like to learn how to do really hard things in this life. Last week we said what it means to go beyond expectations. Today, we're going to talk about how to do the small things that are really hard. In fact, I think it's the small things that we ignore so much that do ultimately have the greatest impact on our lives, and we struggle. We struggle with the small things. I have a few theories as to why we struggle with them. We struggle with them because small things often don't go away after you do them. For example, washing dishes. Then they come back. Mowing the lawn. You do it, but then what? You got to do it again. Apparently, our dogs need fed and taken out more than once. It's a daily thing. Right? Why can't it be that we just need to use the restroom one time in our life and then we never have to do it again? But small things are the things that we have to do continually, and we don't like them because they don't go away. We also don't like them because, well, they just honestly don't seem very important. The big things feel really important. It's like after church today, there's a spaghetti lunch fundraiser that our student ministry is having to gather funds for their missions trip to Northern Ireland this summer. That seems like a really big thing. These kids going across the world, telling people about Jesus, right? So driving the speed limit to me seems small. Right, Ray, officer? So that's, it seems like a small thing to me compared to these big things in life. We also don't like small things because they just don't seem to make a difference. We think, in 5 years, will it matter if I run through McDonald's just this one time? When I was a kid, I used to think, what difference does it really make if I make my bed? They just seem like, who cares? Is it going to matter? We also don't like them because they don't seem very glamorous. Nobody stops by my house every day with an award that tells me, Heather, you're amazing because you held your temper with your children today. We do the small things and nobody's like, good job every day, right? We don't brush our teeth and we get to work and people slap us on the back and go, way to go, buddy. You brushed your teeth today. I don't know, unless you normally don't, and maybe they're excited that you do. But it's a small thing. They don't seem glamorous, but we also don't do them because often with the small things, nobody's watching. Very rarely do other people notice the small things that you do. No one notices when you said no to temptation. Now they notice the big things. When you make these huge mistakes or you have these huge, very visible public victories, people notice that and they comment on it. But not with the small things. In fact, nobody will ever know the majority of the small things we do in this life. So because of this, we adopt other methods for dealing with small things. Now, probably nobody in this room, but some people procrastinate. You got a list of small things and you're like, well, I can do it later, I can do it later. Anybody a procrastinator? Just admit it, you're in church. Okay. Or we are just inconsistent. We say things like, well, I did it yesterday, So how many more days can I wait till I have to do it again? So we see how much time and space we compromise. Well, I'll give in to this temptation just one time. One time won't hurt, and then I'll stop for good. And how does that pan out? But we sort of minimize the small things. What about when we begrudge them and we go, fine, I'll do it if I have to. Just don't expect me to be happy about it. We cheat. You know, if you have children and you ask them to clean the room and they say they did, and then you go in and you look under their bed or in their closet, we cheat. Now, one of the prime examples in my house, and I don't know if this, I don't even need to talk about this other than to vent, so I'm just going to tell you about it. So, a small thing, we cheat. So, when I say to you, do one load of laundry, what does that mean to you? Now, I think it probably means something different to everybody, right? To some members of my family, what that means, one load of laundry, I have one in particular that thinks that just means wash. That's it. I got a couple others that think that it means wash and dry, but leave. And then I have another one who shall remain nameless. He's probably the tallest one of all of us. Who will wash it, dry it, pull it out of the dryer, and throw it on the couch, and then come tell me he did a load of laundry. And when I tell you, like, this pile can often, and I kid you not, be 6 to 8 loads tall. Right? See, when I say I've done a load of laundry, here's what I mean. I've washed, right? I've dried. I've removed them from the said dryer while refilling the others. And then I folded. And then they get put away. That is doing a load of laundry. Anything else to me is cheating. Who agrees with me? That's right. You people filled with the Spirit, you know. Whether it's laundry or something else, don't you have small things that you cheat? You're like, I don't know. I'll leave the trash in my car till tomorrow. And then the day after, if you're already raising your hands. I don't know what that means. Doing the small things are hard for us. It makes it hard in our character. It makes it hard in our careers. It can make it hard in our families. I want to take you back to the Hall of Faith, which is where we were last week, which is Hebrews chapter 11. This is where we call it sort of the Hall of Faith, if you will, because it is a listing of all these people from Genesis to Revelation that walked with great faith. That when God asked them to do something, they did it. And their story lives on for us to learn about. So we're going to go back to the Hall of Faith in dealing with small things, and we're going to go to verse 4. By faith, Abel brought God a better burnt offering than Cain did. By what? Faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. The story of Cain and Abel. Now, Cain and Abel were the sons of Adam and Eve. Cain was the firstborn, and Abel came later. Abel was willing to do the small things. You can read more of their story, and we will. And those small things he was willing to do teach us. Cain was unwilling to do some small things, and his story is going to teach us today. Before we get to the first of the 3 things Cain failed to do, I want to read you more of their story in Genesis 4, 2 through 5. Now Abel kept flocks, so Abel's a shepherd, and Cain worked the soil, so gardening, growing, farming. In the course of time, Cain brought what? Some of the fruits. Everybody say some of the fruits. That's really important. Some of the fruits. We don't know what fruits. We don't know which part of the land he got them. We really don't know much about them other than they were some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the what? Firstborn of his flock. Can you already take a couple steps? Move ahead and see the difference between some of whatever and then the firstborn. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry. Notice it did not say God was angry. Who got angry? Cain. And his face was downcast. Mad face. Cain was unwilling to do the small thing of being generous with God. He struggled. Cain, as the oldest, brought some of the fruits of the soil over a period of time. Abel immediately brought the firstborn, which was the prized, the best. Now, both brothers, because this is really important, know that both brothers acknowledged God's existence. Yes, both of them. Both of them came to worship. Both of them gave an offering. They checked all three of those boxes. The difference is Abel's was generous and Cain's was not. And God knew. I think we forget that God knows. I mean, intellectually, we know that he knows and he sees, but we just don't necessarily live like he knows and he sees. Often, not often, but there have been times, let me start here. I used to be a waitress back in college. Anyone ever do any serving or waitressing? Okay, it is not for the faint of heart, is it? Right? How many of you currently have a job where you are a server or you work in the restaurant? Okay, yes. Not for the faint of heart. Why? Because they have to deal with us. With us. So I used to be a server through college, and it would always amaze me, like, how stingy people could be. Right? Like, they would order, and their bill would be monstrous, and they would pull out their wallet and throw a $5 bill down. I got paid, at the time, $2.13 an hour. Is it still that wage? Oh, I need to talk to somebody. So they get paid, right? And so because you get tips, right? So the theory is that by getting tips, you get paid a fair wage, in theory. But not everyone is generous. And not everyone is even, what I would say, willing to meet the minimum requirement. And so often we would go and make very little that evening depending on who would decide to show up. So as I've gotten older and we've gone out to dinner with people or we've been around, whether it's family or friends, now you can judge me if you want, but I always kind of wait to see what everybody tips. Because I'm going to make up the difference. Like, now I know I'm about to offend a bunch of people. You can always tell, because it's people that get out the calculator. I know, y'all are super mad now, right? And here's what, I don't know if this has anything to do with the message, but if you can't tip, you can't afford to go out to eat. I'm just going to say it, okay? All right, let's move on. Or if you go out to eat and you don't tip, do not tell them what church you go to. Like, under no circumstances. Like, don't wear, anything that says, Mad Park, no baptism shirts, no nothing, okay? If you're like that. But you've had family, you've had friends, and you just know if they're generous people or if they're stingy people. You just know. You've observed them through life. And God knew. And he called Cain on it. And who was angry? Cain. And don't we get angry when we get called on things? Our first reaction is not, oh, you're right, let me humbly, ask forgiveness. It's just initially like, well, I don't know who you think you're talking to. I mean, I gave, right? Can you imagine Cain going, I showed up. I was there just like Abel. I gave just like Abel. I worshiped you, God, just like Abel did. Here's the reason I think that we get angry when it comes to generosity. Because God is the one who gets to choose what's generous, and we don't. And we want to decide what is generous. So we want to tell God, hey, I did this, right? And the Lord is saying, you gave me some of what was left over, whatever was easy and didn't require sacrifice. Thank you. Does God need our money? Oh, he does not. He's not sitting up in heaven going, well, shoot, so-and-so didn't give, so I can't pay the bills now. That's not what's happening. He doesn't turn the water off. That's funny. It just came to me. You can write that down. That's not how God works. It's not because he needs us to. Why does God ask us to be generous with him? Because he knows it's about the motivation of our heart. It's not about the amount. It's about the motivation. In fact, the people in Scripture who gave, that God clearly talks about being favored, are not the ones that gave abundantly in the amount. They gave generously with what they had. Honestly, there probably wasn't that much difference between what Cain gave and what Abel gave. Not really. But Cain was just checking a box. And he was trying to manage God. I've been saying this for a while now, and just, a lot of messages. But the minimum doesn't work in any relationship. In any relationship you are in, you cannot give the minimum of yourself and expect to live life to the full. And God understands this about us. So he asks us to give to him first instead of last. Because guess what happens when you go through all your bills and you get to the end? You waited until the last. Either there's a little there or nothing there, and so you don't. When you give first, which is why it makes it clear Abel gives the firstborn, shockingly, it's always there. But when we prioritize the earthly over the heavenly, the earthly over the eternal. We have no healthy fear of God. And I don't mean fear of God like he's scary. I mean a healthy fear and reverence that he is a good and perfect Father that cares more about the transformation of our hearts than the actions of our hands. And he knew the motivation of both of those guys. So how can you be generous with God? Well, time, talent, and treasure. So how does that work? First one is time. Be generous daily with your time. Give him your undivided attention for whatever portion of the day you can. Maybe it's 5 minutes in the morning. Maybe it's 30 minutes in the morning. Maybe it's an hour at night. But take some time in your day and say, Lord, I'm going to spend this with you in an undistracted manner. I'm going to maybe read the word, or I'm going to talk to you, or I'm going to listen for you, or I'm going to listen to some worship music, or I'm just going to sit in my car over the lunch hour and just turn my attention towards you. It doesn't have to be complicated. There's really no, expertise class on how to spend time with the Lord. It really is as simple as you sit and you think about him and you imagine him. But every day, be generous with your time. One of the biggest obstacles to this, it has been for me, is I found myself trying to spend time with the Lord when my phone is near me. Honestly, our phone near us is probably the biggest distraction in every relationship, isn't it? Here, let me borrow a phone. Who's got a phone on him, just real quick? I noticed you didn't pull out your phone. Do you want me to think you're distracted? It's my daughter's boyfriend. Okay. Just want to make sure he's paying attention during the sermon. I'm teasing you, but not really. So this is... So if I have this phone, look at that little mess. Flips up. Okay. If I'm talking to you, Tom, and I'm talking to you, and I shouldn't say this because I think I've done this before to you, Tom, and I'm talking to you like this, but I'm holding my phone like this. Like, how much of my attention do you feel you're getting? Not much. And you're a very generous, kind, grace-filled person, so you would probably even give me a little grace, but that little 2% of annoyance would be in the back of your head. Like, I'm trying to talk to you, you've just got this phone. I mean, I'm not texting, I'm not calling, but just having it, right? So, thank you, David. I had to learn that when I had my phone present with me, really in any relationship or with the Lord, I'd be, writing in my journal and my phone is blowing up with texts. And I'm distracted, right? Or like I'm trying to sit there and just be in silence and just be still for a minute and I hear like notifications. See, be generous with God every day. Set aside the distractions. No one on this earth should get 24 hours access to you other than the Lord. Can I tell you that? The Lord has 24-hour access to me every minute, every day. But not everybody in my life gets 24-hour access as much as they would like to. Be generous every day. Then you could be generous weekly. You can be generous weekly with the Lord. One time, every 7 days, we get together and worship. What if we could be a church that once every 7 days that we got together and worship, we came together not to see what we could get from it, but to see what we could offer to it, our whole selves. What if we came in to offer our worship, not decide whether worship was good for us? What if we came in and said, Lord, what do you have to say to me today? What do you have to transform in me today? Rather than, well, I wonder, if they're going to how well is this pastor going to feed me today? Y'all, side note, the whole not getting fed, you might as well just cuss me out. Here's my response, just so you know. I'm not getting fed. Well, pick up a freaking spoon, okay? Pick up a spoon. It's so easy. Here's why. I cannot, nor can anyone else, fill you up. I could inspire, I could teach, I could listen, but I can't spiritually, because I'm not divine, I can't spiritually fill that part of you. Does that make sense? You have to get that from God. And so what if we were coming here, having spent every day just a little bit with the Lord, allowing him to fill our cup, and that way when we were all here together, we weren't starting from zero. Now, I know some of you, this is your first time here, and you might be coming in with zero, and you hear that, and you're like, oh, man, I don't know what to do. Look, you're the best place you can be, because the reason we exist is to see you go from empty to a full life in Jesus Christ. And it's good for you to know that the goal is not that someone else would ever complete you, but that Jesus would complete you, and that in him, and by being generous with him, you could live that fulfilling life. So be generous daily, weekly, and then be generous faithfully with your treasure. God asks us to give with our finances because he knows it's a fork in the road for us. He knows it's one of the last things we're willing to do. He knows that it's a fork in the road about our motivation and in our hearts. It has nothing to do with you and me or you and the church. Nothing. It has everything to do with your relationship with God. Let's move on. Aren't you ready to? You're like, okay, let's move on. Here we go. Verse 6 and 7. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So God says, look, Cain, it's not even just about this moment. It's about the fact that the enemy is at your door. And you're giving him a foothold. It's not about this moment, it's about the next one and the next one and the next one, because sin will grow. And the one small poor decision leads to the next small poor decision, leads to the next small poor decision, until you're left with something that lasts forever. This is what God is saying to Cain. This is why he was so upset. Verse 8, the very next verse. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out into the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. You see how quickly that escalated? This is one chapter over from when Adam and Eve ate the fruit. One chapter. That's how fast sin grows. That's how fast eating a piece of fruit, right? Just bringing some of the crops moves into this darkness that settled into Cain's soul. And let us be cautioned. If we think that the small things do not add up to create quite a big thing in our hearts that keep us at a distance from the Lord. And we can judge Cain and go, well, okay, Heather, but that's quite an escalation. But we are so much the same. When we have difficulties with people, when they get in our way, we want them out of our paths. We may not take their life, but we ghost them, we ignore them, we reject them, we tell them off. We do any number of things to get them out of our lives, right? Because we don't want to deal perhaps with what we did wrong or what they did wrong. We're unwilling to come to some kind of reconciliation. See, this action of Cain that seems so crazy to us that he would do this to his brother, that's what was already in his heart. And it didn't start with that. It started way back here with this stinginess and this minimalistic idea that you can operate like that in relationships. Because if he's doing it with God, you know he's doing it with his family, right? You can look at your relationships with your family and friends, and it's a pretty good indication of what your relationship with God looks like. The second small thing Cain didn't do. He was not willing to be selfless again. It's easy to be selfless once, isn't it? We do something that's selfless, and we go, look at me, so selfless. Look what I did there. It's hard to do it again and again and again. But when we go from selfless to selfish, and we make things about us, that's when relationships start to die. So when we had Judah and firstborn, and we bring him home, and the girls are older, and it's quite a thing for them to see this newborn baby that comes into the house, and the whole world sort of stops and begins to revolve around this little tiny new baby, right? Fully dependent on you. Everything stops. And then for them to learn that he's staying. That apparently he's here, like for the duration. And for them to realize, oh, we're going to have to like be selfless again and again and again. Like we've got to welcome somebody else into our home, and so it's going to change things, and now we've got to do things differently again. And you might have to make adjustments again. Being selfless again. You know, relationships are only as strong as your willingness to be selfless again. And when the again stops, the relationships die. How many of you, whether you're single or married or you have been married before, have ever said to someone, you know, you used to do this for me? Nobody rib each other, nobody, you know, right? Back when you used to do the small things. But then over time, we give ourselves permission to not do the small things and to want people to just be okay with the big things. I've sat with a lot of married couples. Jeff and I have sat with a lot of married couples, and one of the things I've heard often is when one of them will say, well, it's my turn to be selfish now. And I get it, right? We all understand that. It's not for lack of understanding or lack of grace or lack of acknowledgement or lack of being able to validate it, the feeling of it. That this is why we're talking about grit, right? We're calling it grit because it's difficult. And we lose our grit. And we excuse not doing the small things, even though it's the small things that have the greatest impact. Why do I need to tell my kids I love them? They should just know. I've heard that so many times over the years. Seems like such a small thing to verbalize it. Well, they see it. I do this, I provide, I do this, and this. Yeah, but do you tell them? Do you know how many people I've sat with who have lost a parent and they've told me that they've never heard the words I love you or I'm proud of you from their parent? And then they'll follow it up and say, well, they worked hard and did this or that, but I never heard that. And I'm sure it seemed like such a small thing at the time. But those small things have such huge consequences. Cain was unwilling to be selfless again. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good. Don't become weary, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Do not give up. It's like last week, the verse that says, a righteous man falls and gets back up 7 times over. Get back up. Do not give up. The third thing Cain didn't do, the third small thing, he just refused to take responsibility. Taking responsibility is so hard. We like to think of ourselves as responsibility, but I went and when I was researching and working on the sermon, I found a few pictures of people that just had one job, one thing to do, to own, one responsibility, and it just went poorly. So I'd like to walk you through them. Let's show the first one. Okay, if you'll notice, I'll give you a minute. Do you see it? Someone needed to do one small thing of just deleting a couple numbers so that instead of 9,292, the temperature in Julian would be 92. So people are dead in Julian. Right? Small thing. Big impact. All right, what's the next one? Okay, just take that in. Someone that works for Google, their only job that day, just get this right. It's one question, one small thing. But you know that everybody that looked this up on that day had to go to the calendar and check, right? I don't know, maybe, okay. Next one. I mean, at what point do you just go, we should stop? We should just stop, like push the button, no more. One job, right? It seems like just a small thing. And then finally, there's one more. In what language would you prefer to take this survey? In what language would you prefer to conduct this survey? Espanol or Spanish? Right? You can imagine the boss calls them in and the person's like, I didn't mean to, it was just a mistake. But it has pretty big consequences. So it's hard to take responsibility to go, okay, it's my fault. I should have done that small thing. But when it's small things, we like to pass blame. And honestly, we live in a world that actually tells us we should pass blame. The world would like to tell us that it's okay for us to live as a victim in this life. To blame that person because I responded to them angrily. It's not my fault, it's theirs for making me angry. Things of that nature. The world says, be a victim. If someone doesn't use the exact right language or use the exact right word, you should be so deeply offended. We're the most offended people. In fact, I'm doing a whole series in a couple on this year on just offense, being offended. It's going to be fun. I'm sure to offend people, I can tell you that. Because we're just so offended all the time. Verse 9, then the Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? And what does he say? I don't know. I don't know. He replied, am I my brother's keeper? Is that my job? I mean, you're God. Isn't that my parents' job? What? Why are you asking me? Notice God did not say, I know you killed your brother. Where did you leave him? He did not say that, did he? Even though he knew. He gave Cain an opportunity to confess because confession is freedom. Hey, where's your brother? I don't know. Cain was living as a very deceived person. Self-deception, where you can almost tell yourself enough lies that you believe them yourself. You don't even know how to blame. How to not blame. You've been doing it for so long. How much better would the world be? And if we were to just own our stuff, just own our stuff. In fact, ownership and taking responsibility is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of confidence and strength. A weak person fights to be right. A strong person cares more about the relationship than they do being right. So, the small things. Cain couldn't be generous with God. He refused to be selfless again. And he refused to take responsibility. So my question to you this morning, it's not some big, long, drawn-out invitation. It's just really this. What is the one small thing that you're avoiding? And maybe you've avoided it so long, it feels now like it's a really big thing. Maybe you knew you were supposed to have the conversation, or you knew you were supposed to apologize, or you knew you were supposed to tell your boss, or you were supposed to address the conflict, or you were supposed to do the chore, or finish the assignment, or study for the test. But you've put it off and put it off and put it off, and now it just feels so huge. You should have confessed, but now the secret feels like a monster inside of you. What's the small thing that you've been avoiding? Maybe it is giving. Maybe it is serving someone else. Maybe it's serving your spouse. Being selfless again. As a church, our mission is to show people who Jesus is. And who Jesus is humble, compassionate, but truth. He sees you and he knows you. Would you bow your heads with me? Heavenly Father, I confess to you that sermons like this can be hard to preach because they are convicting. The small things. Lord, I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would bring to mind the small thing that you would have us to do this week. Maybe we could just commit to this 1 week doing the one small thing you've asked us to do. I pray for a spirit of courage, for a spirit of bravery, for a spirit of vulnerability, for a spirit of Abel. That Abel's purity of intention would be what our own heart's intention is. To love well, to give generously, take responsibility, to have spiritual grit. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your forgiveness. We thank you that you enable us with boldness. We thank you for your patience with us, that you never give up on us. Please be glorified in our life, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. Before I let you go today, let me give you some practical small things maybe the Lord might be inviting you to do. Maybe not. But perhaps. What if the Lord is nudging you to do the small thing of joining a group here at Madison Park? Whether it's the young adults group or it's Alpha, Celebrate Recovery, there's men's groups, there's couples groups, there's all kinds of groups. And maybe what you need is community. And he's inviting you to move towards community and to take that step. You can go on the bulletin, there's a little QR code. You can scan that code and it'll take you to the list of the groups. Alpha and Celebrate Recovery are out in the lobby. They would love to just answer any questions that you might have. Some of you, by the way, Celebrate Recovery, if I could just say it, people tend to think it's all about substance addiction. It's actually not just about substance addiction. It's about anything that's keeping you hung up in this life. Anxiety, depression, chronic illness, anything that's keeping you from moving forward. That's really what it's about. So if you want to ask more questions about that, they'll be out at the table and you can. Another small thing you might be able to do today, if you are new with us, would love to meet you. And you can come to the middle of the lobby. There's a welcome center and I'll be there and just get to connect and give you a little gift from us. If you have no lunch plans today and you want to make an investment into our high schoolers who are going to Northern Ireland for the second year in a row to continue building the relationships that they were building last year. There's the spaghetti lunch in the student center. It's $10 per person. You can go and have lunch, or if you're like, I don't like spaghetti, that's fine. You can still go and give and just forego the spaghetti. You might ask, I think some people wonder, why Northern Ireland? Northern Ireland is one of the most godless places. It's far past post-Christian. Grandparents, great-grandparents, nobody has faith. So our students go and they form relationships and they build them and they talk about Jesus. So if you'd be interested in that today, you go out these doors and then you turn right and go into where it says Student Center. All right, would you stand with me? Y'all got a small thing you're gonna do? I don't believe you at all. I need a little chutzpah. Like, you got a little small thing you can do? Here, okay, I'm gonna really be helpful. Husbands, do the small thing. Open the door in the parking lot. You know what? This might blow your mind. You can actually pull up and pick her up. Right? I'm here to help. That's for free. Okay? You could also fold the laundry. I'm just saying. Some. Ladies, and I'm going to do this because I need to be fair. Ladies, that thing that you're like holding on to that you just want to mention from this morning that annoyed you, don't. No one's clapping for that one. Right? Just don't. Equal opportunity here. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine on you and be so gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his what? Peace. Because it's his peace that passes all understanding. And it's his peace that will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus forever and ever. And the church together said, amen, y'all. All right, we're going to have the longest pickup line ever today, aren't we? It's true.